Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm going to be speaking to you on Wurundjeri and Boon Wurrung land, part of the Kulin Nation, and that sovereignty over these lands has never been ceded, and that also Wurundjeri and Boon Wurrung women have been telling stories and sharing their experiences on these lands for tens of thousands of years. Today we join a very important tradition. I would also like to acknowledge that it is an enormous privilege to share a stage this week with Grace Tame and Kate Jenkins. I feel quite overwhelmed. I was 22 years old when I started working as a government staffer at Australian Parliament House. I was employed there for almost 5 years. I grew up in a building where everyone else seemed very grown up. And it wasn't until years later that I realised just how unusual that experience was. Let me set the scene. One night I was at a hotel bar with a dozen or so colleagues. Everyone was drunk. It's after 11 at night. We have an early start in the morning, but that doesn't seem to bother anyone that much. The more senior men in our group occupy the armchairs, and their bodies reflect their status, stretched out, feet crossed lazily at the ankles, and hands clasped behind the head, when not cupped around a whiskey glass. The more junior blokes are on stools and chairs, hastily grabbed from the dining room, pushed into a circle so as not to miss the action. There are two women aside from me, neither of whom I know very well. We're seated together on a long couch, sitting primly with our knees together because sadly in the early noughties and late noughties, those skirt suits were still cool. The conversation hums along, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. The man who has been sitting on my left stands to make his goodbyes. He's a married father of several kids. We've been chatting for much of the night. The way he talks reminds me of my dad holding court at the breakfast table back when I was at high school, arguing as a method of preparing me for my economics exams. His questions are confrontational, but his tone is warm and encouraging, oozing with charm. My new friend makes a point of singling out everyone in the room for individual mention as he departs. They all feel special. He's an important guy. Being recognised by him makes them feel important too. As he walks off, I realise he's left his hotel room key on the table. Innocently, I jump up and call out his name, waving the plastic card in the air, saying, "Think you've forgotten something?" He walks slowly and deliberately back towards us. He comes right up close beside me to collect the card. His fingers clasp unnecessarily around mine as he leans in, face inches from my own, and says, "Oh, Jamila, you're so naive. It's delicious." He continues, "That was meant for you." He speaks in this exaggerated faux whisper. The whole group can hear him, and that's exactly what he wants. Everyone is looking at me, everyone laughs, and I am mortified. That's one occasion that stands out in my memory, but there were many when I worked in Parliament House. As a staffer, I was a young woman in a world of older men, and for many of those men, Parliament was their playground. Away from their family and friends for 22 weeks of every year, Canberra was a place where they worked hard and played harder. I know now, of course, that I was one of the very fortunate ones. While sexual harassment certainly happened to me on multiple occasions, I was never sexually assaulted. I was never raped. I was spared the indignity, the distress, the trauma, and the brutality and the memories that would have gone along with that. I was spared the experience alleged by Britney Higgins, the brave former Liberal staffer who says she was raped on the couch of Australia's now Defence Minister Linda Reynolds. While Britney went public with what she says happened to her in late February, we know that Britney is not alone. And not only because other women have made allegations against the same man, we know Britney is not alone because as women working in any industry, we know that our safety and security at work are not guaranteed. We know that Britney is not alone because just this week an online petition for sexual consent education in schools was swamped by stories from women who said they were assaulted by their teenage male peers. This is not about political party. This is not even about politics. As women, we know that in male-dominated environments, we are vulnerable. We have to be on our guard. According to a report by Sex Discrimination Commissioner Kate Jenkins' office, almost 40% of women have been sexually harassed at work. This work, as well as similar studies, show that the rate of sexual harassment is much higher amongst vulnerable groups, including young women, queer women, Indigenous women, migrant women, and non-binary people. Make no mistake, sexual harassment and assault tend not to be the fault of one evil wrongdoer. They are the result of a culture that normalises the privilege of powerful men and says they can do and take what they want. In fact, nearly half of those people who have experienced sexual assault or sexual harassment in the workplace consider it to be common, ordinary behaviour. 2 in 5 are aware of at least one other person in the workplace who has been harassed, yet only 1 in 5 will make a complaint. When the nation's Defence Chief, General Angus Campbell, reportedly thinks women can ward off sexual violence of men by avoiding alcohol and presenting themselves as attractive, the truth of it is that none of that matters. Not in schools, not in communities, not at church, not at a bar or at a party, and not in workplaces where the very infrastructure, the so-called system that is supposed to protect us, is actually protecting the powerful. I haven't met Britney Higgins. We come from other sides of the political fence. But I know she did not come forward with those allegations for herself only. I know this from speaking to half a dozen or so fellow former staffers who have called me in recent days to whisper, to reveal, to sob, and to say out loud, some for the first time, that they too have experienced sexual assault while working in Australian Parliament House. Britney Higgins came forward to protect others. My friends tell me that is the only reason they would consider doing the same. I imagine Higgins made her experience public in both a desperate bid for justice and to make sure that another woman did not experience what she did. And what does she get for her trouble? A media storm seeped in innuendo, a bunch of raised eyebrows, her boyfriend forced to resign his job, her old boss reportedly calling her a cow, and an employer, a government, whose focus appeared fixed on the political consequences and not their former employees' personal well-being. I welcome Minister Birmingham's announcement just an hour or two ago that Kate Jenkins will lead an investigation of Parliament workplace culture. That is a good thing and a necessary thing. Let me take you on a bit of a trip down memory lane. When we were teenagers, my sister and I watched a lot of Neighbours. Not like a lot, like a lot of Neighbours. It was our go-to mode of decompression, following classes and sporting matches, but before family dinner. We'd lounge on the couch after school, munching on the good biscuits if mum wasn't looking, and inhaling the increasingly ludicrous plot lines. We were addicted, and from the giggles, it sounds like some of you were also. There was the episode where Harold fell off the cliff face after returning 5 years later with amnesia and thinking his name was Todd. There was the car crash, oh, we've got fans, that saw Dee and Toadie plummet into the sea between their wedding and the reception. Poor Toadie would continue to be morbidly unlucky in love. Neighbours released Delta Goodrem's Born to Try single as part of an actual storyline involving a complex love triangle with Taj and Jack. Paul Robinson was pushed from the Lassiter's balcony after having lit the place on fire just a few years prior. The 6 possible subjects who all lived on the same street provided literal months of content. And then, in the year I turned 18, the year I started university and would later leave home, my sister and I sat there with the old TV playing Neighbours behind us. Izzy falsely accused her boyfriend Gus of rape. My 15-year-old sister and I lapped it up We called our mates on three-way dialing, the young people won't know what that is, to dissect this shocking plot twist. It was appalling, disgusting. How could she? This fictional crime was so great that it seemed too awful to comprehend, even from the terrible Izzy. It was unbelievable, which is exactly right. It was unbelievable, because false claims of sexual assault and rape are exceedingly rare. The most commonly cited figure is that 5% of rape allegations are found to be false. But to rely on that figure alone would entirely be a misrepresentation, because only 1 in 10 women actually reports her sexual assault to police. The vast majority stay silent. What this means is that 90% of rapes go unreported. And because the 5% of rape allegations a false figure can, by its very definition, only apply to reported rapes, this leaves the actual false allegation figure at around 0.5%, or 1 in 200. And yet these are the stories we were fed as teenagers. It is a myth still allowed to permeate dinner table discussions and water cooler conversations. It is the undertone of internet articles and snide tweets. There is a repeated intimation that women can't always be trusted on these matters, that women make things up, that women bend the truth, that women are mad, crazy, emotional females, that women lie. Last Friday, the media reported that a cabinet minister was at the centre of a historical rape allegation made by a woman who had since taken her own life. A letter detailing the deceased's accusation had been sent to the Prime Minister, amongst other powerful political figures, by the woman's friends. On Wednesday this week, that minister, the Attorney General, Christian Porter, came forward. In a press conference, he denied the allegations vigorously and categorically. He was visibly distressed and rattled. Yesterday morning, the Prime Minister dismissed calls for an independent inquiry. This is despite the fact the Prime Minister did not read the contents of the accusatory letter. He was merely briefed on it by others. During his emotional press conference, Christian Porter, the highest law officer in our country, asked journalists to imagine just for a second that the allegations were not true. That is a perfectly fair and reasonable thing for him to ask. He is the subject of life-altering allegations, and they may well be false. However, the woman who made those allegations is now deceased. She cannot ask us to imagine the opposite, and so we have to do that for ourselves. I would like to share with you now some powerful words that are not my own. While we can't be so vain to pretend to answers, we must be so humble to fall before those who were forsaken and beg to them our apology. A sorry that dare not ask for forgiveness, a sorry that dare not try and make sense of the incomprehensible or think it could, a sorry that does not insult with an incredible promise, a sorry that speaks only of profound grief and loss. We honour every survivor in this country. We love you. We hear you. We honour you. Those are the words of our Prime Minister, spoken as part of his apology to the survivors of institutional child sex abuse. His speech was delivered in Parliament during October 2018 following the Royal Commission. That Royal Commission heard testimony from survivors whose abusers have since died. Survivors for whom a conviction of their abuser would never be possible, but for whom an apology still mattered. The Commission also heard testimony from the friends and family of child sex abuse victims who had taken their own lives or since passed away. Their stories were meaningful and their evidence significant to the Commission's final report. Just because the police have decided not to investigate does not render other forms of inquiry void. And just because testimony cannot be given by the alleged victim does not make an independent inquiry futile. At present, there is no clear forum in which this woman's allegation against the Attorney General can be tested. It is imperative that one is created. Otherwise, the court of public opinion will decide, and that serves nobody's interest. To those in the room today who feel despair or rage or something in between, I share your frustrations. These stories are our stories. In one way or another, and at some time or another, we have all been made to feel small, unimportant, and powerless. We have all watched men taking advantage, taking liberties, and taking our self-assurance in the process. We have all experienced something which we were too scared to report or protest or push back against or even object to because we didn't want to be that girl. That girl is the one who calls out a mate at the footy over a sexist remark about a player's wife. She objects to affectionately being called sweetie or darling by her boss. She follows the sexual harassment procedures when a colleague sticks his hand up her skirt at Friday night drinks. That girl isn't a girl at all, she is a woman who wants to be treated fairly as a colleague, as a boss, as an employee, as a human being. You never want to be that woman. That woman can't take a joke. She's no fun. She's politically correct. She's boring. She should just learn to be cool with it. Learn to be a team player, you know? Why does she have to suck the humour out of everything? She should stop playing the victim. How come she doesn't get that the boys were only kidding around? The boys were just being boys. Except the boys aren't boys. They're grown men. I've been that woman. But you know what I've been far more times? I've been not her. I've let things go. I've smiled politely, prettily, and avoided having an argument. I've even laughed along with the joke when I know it's wrong, and it makes my skin crawl that I did that. Often it was because I felt exhausted by always being the one who had to say something, or I let it go because it didn't seem like a big enough deal to make a thing out of it. There were times when I simply didn't know how to handle a situation and I felt out of my depth. I stayed silent because I was scared, because sometimes being that woman is really, really hard. But I won't do it anymore. There comes a point when you have to say it out loud. If not for yourself, say it out loud for the benefit of other women, for the women who have experienced sexual violence and whose daily existence is shaped by that. Say it so that other women don't feel alone. Say it so other women know it wasn't their fault, even if they were drunk, even if they were somewhere they shouldn't have been after hours, and even if they were presenting themselves as attractive. Be that woman so the young women whose school experiences of sexual assault are months old, not decades, know that what happened to them is not okay. So that good men know the truth of what others do in their name, and that standing silently by, watching it go on, makes them complicit. Say it so it stops being normal in the corridors of Parliament, on the third floor of an office or a building site, at a hairdressing salon, in a doctor's office, at a law firm, or in a goddamn high school. Be that woman because not everyone can be. Be that woman because she is a hero. I'll be right here and I've got your back. Thank you.